Welcome everyone. So Sandrine and I will be presenting today, and we'll be talking about researchers as change agents and supporting a change in research culture. So this has been a collaboration project that started initially with Kathy and I talking at a conference in 2020 and looking at the purpose of co-creation in design and development of programs. We were delighted after that to bring Sandrine on board, and it's been a collaborative project for the last year. Interesting enough, Sandrine and I had never worked together before, so it was a lot of learning in the whole process. And from a communication perspective, we used a Slack channel, which was very helpful. And we did a lot of work, desk research on research culture, and we've heard some of the challenges that we faced with our fantastic keynote speaker, Jessica Gagnon, early on. So we looked at Welcome, Royal Society, some of the work that was already done, initiatives at King's College London, where Kathy is based. And the whole aim was to really look at research culture and thinking about what makes a thriving research culture and how could we design a workshop that would help us engage with researchers in a different way. And this is something as well, we drew on research in organizational development, organizational behavior, and also change management. So we want to share a little bit more about what our scope was. Our scope was to turn it around. Instead of thinking about what is wrong with the current research culture, it was about what could we do to engage and ensure that researchers could thrive in a thriving research culture. So there's a switch to that positive language that I think Jessica was talking about at the end, that hopefulness that we can do something different. And our focus was very much as well about the thinking that is required, the mindset, but also trying to make sure that we had already a scope. So we looked at 3 key lenses that were going to make a difference, and I'll talk more about that. And we wanted to also position research staff, researchers, as change agents. So what is their role and responsibility in doing this? So when we looked at that element and trying to look at inclusivity, the whole aim was to do this. My website, here we go. The challenges we had is that we felt the top-down approach was insufficient, and just expecting only for institutions to change the structure is obviously needed. There's a lot of dynamics at play, as we've seen earlier on. But we wanted to also understand how culture was perceived by researchers. So there was a lot of conversations going on about the stress, the fact that things were not moving so quickly. But there was also this, implication that maybe change or researchers were seen as kind of passive actors in the whole process. And there's also multiple cultures. So actually it is much broader than saying there's one culture overall in research. There are multiple cultures depending on where you work and departments. So we didn't want to just do another workshop about research culture. We didn't want to think that we were assuming that we had to wait for institutions to change the structure. We felt that we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to engage with researchers, and there was a multiple benefits in what they could do differently and how they could impact the research culture for a lasting change. And that was really our aim. So as I mentioned, we had already 3 lenses. So there was a collaboration effort that was really important before we started into the co-creation with some of the researchers that were going to be involved in the process. So we co-created together. These are all the elements on the right-hand side that one could talk about on research. And we engage with this, but we do it through these 3 lenses, which are around openness, and that is around open science, but also openness in terms of how we cope and our well-being in research, the communication and how we are working together. There's the lens around creative and innovation, which is critical for research and researchers and their ability to be sustainable, and also the collaboration elements, which is really close to Sandrine's heart. So these are the 3 lenses we decided to work on, but we wanted to know how it was perceived and how we could, in a way, transform it. So it was, more relevant and empowering for the researchers we're going to be targeting and reaching. So we followed a very clear step process, which is around design thinking and co-creation. which involved engaging with some researchers early on, having a kind of first workshop and seeing what happened and what was the implications and the feedback we received. And now we're launching our third workshop. And we've had about, on average, 20-25 participants for each workshop. They are 1 day long and they all run online currently. And we have one that is going to happen in the next few days, about a week and a half ago, about 10 days. And we've had already 35 people. So the participation is growing. I've just put a post here on creativity or the creative process, of co-creation and how it is important. I did that on LinkedIn and I'm getting some really interesting feedback across, sectors, but especially for development programs, and how important it is to create added value and the relevance to researchers. So it's empowering them, it's helping them to gain new skills and mindsets, as well as adapting and changing the research culture from within. So now I'm going to leave Sandrine tell us more about what that involved.
So, one of the challenge for us as researcher developer is how do we empower researchers being the active contributor to the research culture? And many of you who are working in researcher development know that often what we have in our program is what I call the shopping list of courses. And we tend to talk about, in a way, we conduct ourselves towards researchers a little bit like they are the consumer of our workshop and courses. And clearly there is a need to shift and move to an approach that we could call, the engage and dialogue. So instead of knowing our audience, our researchers from a distance, through surveys or participation data, really the engage and dialogue approach is saying, actually, how can we ourselves put into check our biases and the default position that we have in the way we engage with researchers? Can we become more collaborative between researcher designers, between researcher developers? And can we really embed the co-creation process as we develop researcher development program? And can we really go from the lived experience of a participant to a program in designing our programs? And for me, the SIDs of empathy, listening, and challenging our assumption in the way we engage is really key. Next slide, please. So what we did for this particular project was to host a co-creation event where we were going to develop a workshop on how researchers can think about their mindset in the way to thrive in research. And we had like a live Zoom event where we invited some co-creators to come and experiment with us what that sort of workshop could look like. And the way we framed this experience was about developing leadership for the participant and also getting them to understand the process of developing program. Next slide, please, Natacha. So what does it look like? So part of an element of the workshop was to talk about collaboration. And as a researcher developer, if you're going to develop a session on collaboration, there are lots of different threads that you could use. So in the co-creation event, what we did is say, okay, well, these are 27 different threads, ideas, ways of approaching or thinking on collaboration, and basically present that to a co-creator and kind of let that sit and basically take the time to just wait, listen, and really let the stories of the co-creator kind of unfold through the co-creation workshop. And then on the basis of this conversation, then think about how can we adapt the session that we may include in the session. What sort of language are we going to use in the session? What sort of connection are we going to make in the activities that we will do for participants? So in a way, why bother with that sort of approach? Because it's almost, it's sort of more work. What I would say, well, it's not an easier process, but in a way, taking the time to really listen and wait and hear the stories is a way for us to feel the experience of our researchers. It's not just, okay, I know there is a diverse audience in the room. It's actually through listening to the stories of their experiences in the context, it gets us to go from thinking to actually feeling the experience. And it's a way really of influencing our thinking of the way that we are interacting and engage in dialogue with them. So what does it change? Well, I mean, in the context of this particular session, some of the things that were reinforced through the conversation that we had with our co-creator was the importance of the relationship that people develop at the beginning of setting up a collaboration. We also thought about, helping people to be really open-minded in terms of, what's the path ahead when you're thinking about developing as a research professional. They also told us that really helping researchers really think about their strengths and their weaknesses, and also really the power of networks where researchers come together, not necessarily on the research topic, but creating the connection and reinforcing this in the context of a session that we will be running.
So lessons learned. I think it was sometimes, we don't know if it's to do with the lockdown or not, because maybe sometimes it helps because people were available online and not necessarily working at a lab or different places. So access to co-creators can be sometimes a bit challenged with pressure with time, so you have to be very flexible. Evaluation data post-workshop is key. We also use data during the session and having Padlets and different technology that help us engage with participants during the co-creation process and during the workshops that are very interactive and where co-creation is happening also. It is probably a lengthy process in development phase, but actually initially, and I think after that, it speeds up the process at the end for some reason. So it's an investment at the start, and then you get the benefits afterwards. There's a price for the level of engagement in terms of planning, in terms of the flexibility that you need, in terms of finding and engaging with co-creators early on, and in terms of the way you design. There's an element about letting go of the control and having a clear scope, but being able to hear, listen, and understand the perspectives and empathize with our audience early in the process, which I think has been for all of us a wonderful experience. So did we achieve our goal? That was a good question we asked ourselves. We achieved the goal of creating a different type of workshop that engaged researchers early on in the process and that spoke their language and helped them, provided them with skills and mindsets that could help them thrive in research and impact research culture. Do we have the data to show that in the long term? No, it is around longitudinal data. It takes a lot of time to collect this information. We're thinking about ways how we might do this, or for a future project of looking at having another workshop, maybe like a few months later on, and trying to assess whether there was a change in practice and the different types of involvement. We know that some of our co-creators are also involved in some of the projects at King's on research culture. So there are trends, and there are ways where we can measure impact. So I did a lot of work on evaluation, and it could be another topic. So we probably partly achieved our goals, but we know that evaluation is critical to see whether there's a change of behaviors.
So in a way, here the question to you is, how can you become more, what we may call be more pirate in being a researcher developer? So the term "be more pirate" comes from a recent book that I've read from Sam Conniff, and in a way, it's about saying if we are going to change, diversity, if we're going to really create inclusive culture, it's not just about the work that others are doing, it's also how we engage ourselves. And I think that as researcher developer, letting go of the control maybe that we want to have, accepting the messiness of a process that is, where we let the voice of others kind of play its role. So are we prepared to do this? Some of us maybe maybe not, but I know that for me, it's something that's really, really valuable in challenging, my own assumption about, what people need.
Yes, so for us, it's both in terms of making sure our practice, improves over time. It's challenging some of our assumptions. So if you're interested in finding more about how we did that and our whole concept around thriving in research, or have a workshop you're looking at or a design, we're more than happy to talk to you. We'd love to hear as well how you might evaluate it, or if you've had some similar projects or thinking about how co-creation can be embedded in our practice. And as Sandrine said, probably is not necessarily relevant to all the workshops, all the programs we're preparing, but it might have its place in specific areas of our programs, especially focusing on research culture, which is such a big topic and requires many different interventions and many different perspectives to embed change. So we want to thank our co-creators who came from King's College London and another institution, and who've been very supportive in this project. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that, of course, here. And we want to thank Kathy and King's College London for the opportunity to run this, this project, which has been extremely powerful for all of us involved. I think that's all we have.